Think you've already uncovered every terrifying gem the horror genre has to offer? Think again. There are films that slip quietly between the cracks of mainstream conversation, stories whispered about in late-night forums, passed around like forbidden secrets, or remembered only by those who dare to chase the deeper shadows of cinema. These are not the titles that dominate streaming charts or appear on every top 10 ranking. They're the ones that linger in the dark corners waiting for the viewer who's willing to look past the obvious. What makes them unforgettable isn't just fear. It's the way they warp familiar anxieties into something uncomfortably intimate. A quiet home becomes a trap. A seemingly harmless ritual twists into a nightmare. A grieving family learns that the dead never leave cleanly. These films burrow under the skin because they weren't designed merely to startle, they were crafted to haunt. Some of them vanished after a limited release. Others resurfaced years later with cult followings. A few were dismissed on arrival, only to be rediscovered by audiences who finally understood what they were trying to say. Tonight, we're diving straight into that hidden territory. 15 horror films that challenge expectation, distort comfort, and linger long after the lights come back on. Whether they came from forgotten decades or slipped by unnoticed in modern times, each one carries a distinct kind of darkness, subtle, suffocating, and impossible to shake off once you've seen it. Let's step into the shadows. Film Hash. One Rosemary's Baby, 1968. Roman Polanski approached Rosemary's Baby with meticulous precision, yet he chose to keep its conclusion shrouded in silence. Mia Farrow was given a script missing several key pages, including the full explanation of the cult's intentions. Polanski wanted her confusion to echo Rosemary's own dawning fear, an emotional reality tied not to performance, but to genuine uncertainty. Scenes involving the coven were shot in ways that distanced Farrow from the rest of the cast. She rarely rehearsed with them, was excluded from discussions about the symbolism of certain rituals, and often received new dialogue minutes before filming. This isolation was not accidental. It created the sense that Rosemary was drifting alone through a web of half-glimpsed conspiracies. The final revelation, the ultimate secret, was kept from nearly everyone. Cast members were told conflicting explanations about the ending, some suggesting a psychological breakdown, others implying the supernatural. When Farrow stepped into the final room and saw what awaited her, she was seeing the prop for the first time. Her tremble, her whispered disbelief, and the horror in her eyes were genuine, captured before she had time to analyze or intellectualize the moment. Rosemary's Baby endures because its terror feels intimate. The actors were not participants in a fully revealed story. They were wanderers in a world that concealed its truths until the final breath. The dread that saturates the film is not just cinematic, it's the residue of a production built on secrecy. Film Hash 2, The Shining, 1980. Stanley Kubrick was infamous for exerting psychological pressure on his actors, but on The Shining, he wielded secrecy like a weapon. While Jack Nicholson received a version of the script that shifted constantly, Shelley Duvall was given even less clarity. She often didn't know which scenes would be filmed on any given day, nor what emotional state she was expected to inhabit until moments before the camera rolled. Kubrick believed that withholding information would heighten the instability he needed from her character. The crew quietly altered set pieces between takes so that the overlook itself seemed to transform. Hallways elongated, furniture moved, shadows were manipulated. Duvall's mounting anxiety, visible in her shaking hands and frayed voice, was not purely performance. She was responding to a world that refused to remain consistent. Kubrick's secrecy was most extreme in scenes involving Danny. Only the child actor and Kubrick knew certain key elements of the ending, leaving the rest of the cast to interpret cryptic instructions like, "React as if the hotel has finally chosen you." Nicholson later admitted that he didn't fully understand what Kubrick intended until he saw the final cut. The climax, chaotic, cold, and emotionally raw, works because the cast wasn't operating from a complete understanding of the narrative. They were operating inside Kubrick's maze, unsure which path was real. Film Hash 3, The Wicker Man, 1973. On the set of The Wicker Man, secrecy wasn't just a tactic, it was a philosophy. Director Robin Hardy believed that the film's unnerving power rested on its slow erosion of certainty, and he wanted his actors to experience that same erosion. Edward Woodward, who played the morally rigid Sergeant Howie, was given an incomplete script that deliberately avoided revealing the final ritual. He knew his character was heading toward danger, He just didn't know how violently that danger would manifest. The supporting cast, many of whom portrayed the eccentric island residents, received even less information. They were instructed to behave as if they held a secret that the outsider was never meant to know, which conveniently mirrored their real position on set. Some scenes were filmed with false cues, misleading props, or contradictory dialogue, creating an atmosphere where no one felt fully grounded in the narrative. The final sequence was the most carefully orchestrated deception. Woodward expected a confrontation, but he did not expect the towering figure that awaited him in the field. When he rounded the corner and saw it for the first time, cameras were already rolling. His initial gasp, the stunned hesitation in his step, the dawning horror across his face. Those reactions were authentic, stemming from the sudden recognition of the character's fate. The Wicker Man succeeds because Woodward's descent mirrors that of the viewer, a man walking toward a truth he cannot see until it stands blazing in front of him. The ending feels mythic because for the cast, it truly was a revelation. Film #4, The Blair Witch Project, 1999. Few productions embraced secrecy as radically as The Blair Witch Project. The cast was handed only skeletal outlines of the plot and sent into the woods with almost no knowledge of what scenes they would face each day. Their script consisted of vague emotional cues. You're hungry, you're angry, you're terrified, but never why. The filmmakers wanted their exhaustion, frustration, and panic to be real. At night, the directors crept through the forest, shaking tents, snapping branches, and leaving strange arrangements of twigs where the actors would stumble upon them in the dark. The actors were never told when these disturbances would occur or whether they signaled danger or misdirection. Their sleep deprivation was engineered. So was their fear. The ending was the most closely guarded element of the entire shoot. Only one actor knew he would be standing in the corner of that basement. The rest entered the decrepit house, with cameras rolling, unaware of what horror awaited them. When Heather Donahue's voice cracks in terror, it's the sound of someone experiencing a final moment she didn't see coming. The Blair Witch Project thrives on authenticity. Because its cast wasn't performing terror, they were navigating it blindly. The film's realism comes from a production that refused to let the actors feel safe, informed, or in control. Film #5, Session 9, 2001. On the surface, Session 9 appears meticulously controlled, a slow descent into paranoia within the abandoned halls of Danvers State Hospital. But behind the scenes, control was the last thing the cast experienced. Brad Anderson withheld the final script pages, forcing the actors to inhabit the story with the same uncertainty as their characters, who slowly lose their grasp on what is real. Each day, the actors received partial updates. A scene rewritten, a clue removed, a new audio tape introduced without explanation. The sterile, crumbling asylum became a psychological pressure cooker. One actor recalled wandering off set and genuinely getting lost in the labyrinth of locked wards because he didn't know which areas the production had altered for the shoot. The most unsettling moment came during the recording booth scene. Anderson instructed the sound team to trigger a distorted voice effect without warning one that wasn't included in any rehearsal. The jolt of fear on the actors' faces is immediate, visceral, and entirely unscripted. The cast was told 3 different possible endings for the film, but none of them were real. The true conclusion was revealed only when Anderson assembled the final cut. The resulting confusion, genuine trembling, infuses the entire third act with an eerie authenticity. Session 9 works because its actors weren't just playing paranoia. They were absorbing it. Film #6, The Changeling, 1980. Though The Changeling is renowned for its elegance and restrained horror, the set itself was governed by secrecy. The director believed the film's grief-soaked atmosphere required performances that felt genuinely fragile, so the cast never received the final 10 pages of the script. George C. Scott in particular was kept in the dark about the final emotional turn, allowing his reactions to remain raw and unpolished. The most chilling example occurred during the seance scene. Scott expected a subdued, meditative moment, the kind rehearsed days before. Instead, the crew deliberately altered the audio cues, adding violent table knocks and sudden temperature drops using hidden air compressors. His startled, breathless response captured the exact disorientation the director wanted, a man losing his grip on the boundary between the living and the dead. The ending was shot over 2 nights, with Scott told only that his character would discover the truth. He wasn't informed how that truth would manifest. When the practical effects team unleashed the final reveal, his expression held a sincerity that could never have been forged in rehearsal. The heartbreak, the shock, the sense of something too horrible to articulate those elements came from experiencing a scene he had not mentally prepared for. The result is a performance that feels lived in, trembling, haunted. The Changeling remains one of horror's most respected ghost stories because its terror is grounded not in spectacle, but in genuine emotional unraveling. Film Hash. 7 Possession, 1981. Possession is remembered for Isabelle Adjani's legendary subway scene, but few know how much of the film's terror grew from deliberate narrative withholding. Director Andrzej Zulawski believed that emotional truth could only emerge from instability. He refused to give the actors a complete script, claiming the ending should reveal itself to them the same way trauma reveals itself to a fractured mind, slowly, violently, and without mercy. During production, Zulawski altered dialogue moments before takes, pushed scene blocking into physically punishing territory, and hid entire subplots from the cast. Adjani later said she felt psychologically cornered, often unsure whether she was performing fiction or exercising something real. In one notorious sequence involving Mark's discovery in the apartment, the crew dimmed the lighting far beyond rehearsal levels, creating an oppressive atmosphere that forced the actors into visceral fear. Zulawski filmed several variations of the final scenes, each stranger than the last. No one on the cast knew which version would define the film's reality. The emotional collapse visible in Adjani's and Sam Neill's performances comes from the same place two actors trapped inside a story that kept mutating, refusing to give them a stable truth to hold on to. Years later, Adjani confessed she would never do a film like that again. And it shows. Possession is a masterpiece of unraveling psyche because its cast was left to unravel for real, navigating a climax they were never allowed to understand. Film Hash 8. The Beyond, 1981. Lucio Fulci was notorious for tormenting his actors, but on The Beyond, he took his methods to extremes. The film was constructed as a surreal descent into the unknown, and Fulci believed the actors shouldn't understand the ending because the characters themselves never would. As a result, the cast received fragmented pages with cryptic instructions like, "React in terror," or "Look as if you've seen something unspeakable," but no explanation of what that unspeakable thing actually was. In one scene inside the flooded basement, the lead actress was told she would see a figure emerging from darkness. She wasn't informed that the effects team would unleash a grotesque, half-melted corpse prop, complete with swarming insects right in front of her. The scream she gives is not staged. It is the involuntary reaction of someone witnessing a nightmare she didn't know was coming. The ending, a nihilistic plunge into another realm, was deliberately hidden from the entire cast. Fulci rehearsed it only with his cinematographer, leaving the actors to wander the set with minimal direction, told only to accept what happens. When they finally viewed the finished film, several described the finale as a shock that feels like a punch. They had acted inside a puzzle that no one explained. That sense of helplessness of trying to make sense of a world that refuses to obey logic is why The Beyond feels so eerily authentic. The cast was not merely performing dread. They were drowning in a story without answers. Film Hash 9. Phantasm, 1979. On set, the world of Phantasm was just as disorienting as the dreamlike nightmare audiences eventually saw on screen. Don Coscarelli understood that the film's power relied on instability, never letting the viewer know whether they were in a dream, a memory, or a hallucination. To replicate that same uncertainty in the performances, he withheld the final act from the cast entirely. Actors received rewritten pages daily, some contradicting earlier scenes, and Coscarelli refused to clarify which version represented the truth. The tall man's appearances were especially guarded. Several sequences involving Angus Scrimm were shot without warning, the actors sharing the scene. One famous hallway moment where Scrimm lunges unexpectedly used a genuine jump from a cast member who believed the take had already ended. Coscarelli kept the camera rolling, preserving the raw panic that flickers across his face. The ending remained the most closely protected secret. The lead actor was told 3 different explanations for the reality-bending finale, each designed to push his performance into a state of genuine uncertainty. When the film was finally screened for the cast, several were stunned to realize the story they thought they were telling had been one of many possible timelines. Their confusion, fear, and emotional dislocation are embedded in the fabric of the film. Phantasm endures because it feels like a dream slipping out of your hands. That sensation is real. The cast was never allowed to hold the story firmly to begin with. Film Hash 10. The Legend of Hell House, 1973. Although The Legend of Hell House is remembered for its oppressive atmosphere and psychological tension, few know how meticulously the production manipulated its cast. The director wanted the haunting to feel invasive, unpredictable, like something rewriting itself in real time. To achieve that, he removed the final act from every script handed to the actors. They knew the house had a dark will. They did not know how or when it would reveal itself. During filming, the cast was subjected to a series of carefully controlled disruptions. Lighting cues were altered without warning. Props moved between takes. Doors that had been unlocked suddenly clicked shut as cameras rolled. One pivotal seance scene was performed without rehearsal, with the actress discovering in real time that the table beneath her would violently jolt. Her gasp, sharp guttural, became one of the film's most memorable sounds. The blocked-out ending became a source of quiet paranoia among the actors. Each one believed the story would resolve in a different direction, and the director encouraged these competing theories. He wanted the characters' unease, their sense of being manipulated by unseen forces, to mirror the production itself. When the actual ending was finally revealed during the first full cast screening, several performers were visibly shaken. They hadn't been acting in fusion. They had been living inside a narrative that withheld its truth until the very last moment. The result is a film whose dread feels organic, not manufactured. The Legend of Hell House doesn't just depict characters unraveling. It shows actors confronting a story that they were never allowed to fully understand. Film #11, Shadow of the Hawk, 1976. Shadow of the Hawk merged indigenous mysticism with supernatural horror, but what truly set the film apart was the director's insistence on keeping the cast in the dark, literally and narratively. Only the lead actor was given anything resembling a complete story arc. Everyone else received isolated pages, stripped of context, filled with cryptic notes that seemed intentionally misleading. The idea was to make the characters' disorientation indistinguishable from the actors. The forest sequences became the most notorious. Cast members walked into those woods with no clue what the crew had prepared. Sudden wind blasts, hidden sound rigs, unexpected animal movements, every element was designed to provoke real reactions. One supporting actress later revealed that the screams heard during a nighttime ritual scene were not scripted at all. She had been told the sequence would be quiet, atmospheric, only to be met with a violent eruption of fire and masked performers rushing from the trees. The ending was protected like a sacred secret. The director filmed two entirely different climaxes and let the cast assume either one might be the real one. When the final cut premiered, several actors admitted they were stunned. They had spent months believing a version of the story that never existed. That shock and odd blend of betrayal and awe perfectly matched the film's central theme of spiritual forces guiding events beyond human understanding. Shadow of the Hawk endures not because of its elaborate effects or its modest budget, but because the actors' confusion is palpable. They aren't performing fear. They're trying to navigate a myth they were never allowed to fully see. Film #12 Blood Beach, 1980. On the sun-soaked coast of Santa Monica, Blood Beach set out to create a horror experience rooted in unpredictability. The cast believed they were making a campy creature feature thriller, but the director had other plans. He intentionally withheld the final act from the actors, insisting that their confusion was essential. No one truly knew what lived beneath the sand. No one knew how the deaths connected. And most importantly, no one knew what the final reveal would look like, or if there even was one. The production became a controlled experiment in anxiety. Extras were told to fall into pits at random moments without alerting the leads beforehand. Crew members triggered sudden sand collapses using hidden pneumatic rigs, causing genuine panic that translated perfectly to film. One actor later confessed that he developed a real fear of walking across open beach terrain during shooting because he no longer trusted where the ground would remain solid. The secrecy reached its peak during the climactic discovery scene. The director gathered the cast, handed them redacted script pages, and told them only this react, as if the truth finally makes you sick. When the cameras rolled, the actors were met not with a fully built creature, but with a horrifying practical mock-up they had never been shown. Their nausea in the final cut is authentic, captured in a single take before the prop was whisked away. The studio's marketing famously used the tagline, "Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, you can't get to it." But what they didn't reveal is that for the cast, the real terror wasn't the monster, it was never knowing what scene they were actually filming. Film #13, The Kindred, 1987. The production of The Kindred was notorious for its secrecy. Its creature effects were considered too shocking to reveal, even to the cast, and so the actors walked onto set each day with only a partial understanding of what their characters were up against. The script they received was deliberately vague, filled with misleading stage directions and scenes labeled to be determined. The goal was simple: make their confusion real. During one of the Creature Lab sequences, the lead actors were instructed to enter the room and react honestly to whatever you see. They expected a simple prosthetic demonstration. Instead, the effects team unveiled one of the film's grotesque animatronics, oozing, writhing, and unexpectedly loud. The cast's recoil was so genuine that the director kept the very first take, refusing to let them rehearse the moment or grow desensitized to the design. Even more unsettling was the secrecy surrounding the ending. The crew filmed multiple variations of the final confrontation, and each actor was told a different story about the creature's origins. The emotional dissonance, hope, dread, confusion was intentional. Their performances needed to feel fractured, as if their characters were piecing together a nightmare that refused to make sense. When the film was released, several cast members admitted they were shocked by the final cut. Scenes they thought were part of the story had been discarded, while moments they assumed were experiments became crucial parts. The Kindred thrives on uncertainty, and that uncertainty wasn't just a narrative device. It was the very method of production engineered to keep the actors off balance until the final frame. Film #14, Jennifer, 1978. On the surface, Jennifer looks like one of many supernatural revenge stories that filled the late 70s. But behind the camera, the production operated under a strange philosophy. The less the actors understood about Jennifer's powers, the more genuine their reactions would be. The director distributed incomplete script pages, often swapping out the final lines right before the camera rolled. The supporting cast was instructed not to ask questions, not to speculate, and not to attempt to decipher the arc of Jennifer's transformation. Their confusion would be the emotional backbone of the film. One particularly intense scene took place inside a dimly lit classroom where the tension was meant to erupt without warning. The actress playing Jennifer was given secret instructions before filming her co-stars were not. When the lights began to flicker and the props started to move, the actors' stares of disbelief were unfiltered. They weren't reacting to horror choreography. They were reacting to a moment they had been told would be simple dialogue. The ending was the most guarded element of all. Several alternate finales were filmed, and none of the cast knew which one represented the real conclusion. The actress herself later admitted that the uncertainty made her feel isolated, unsettled, and mentally exhausted. That anxiety bled naturally into her performance, giving Jennifer a haunted quality that no rehearsal could replicate. Decades later, fans still debate which scenes were scripted and which were born out of pressure, secrecy, and improvisation. In a film built on emotional volatility, Jennifer stands out as a production where the actors weren't just playing fear, they were living in it. Film #15, Dark August, 1976. It begins as a quiet tale set in the woods of Vermont, but Dark August carried a secret that not even its cast was allowed to know. The director withheld the final pages of the script, insisting that the fear of the unknown needed to seep naturally into the performances. Actors were given fragments, hints of curses, sightings, strange rituals in the trees, but never the shape of what awaited their characters. As filming progressed, the cast started to mirror the paranoia of the story itself. They whispered to each other between takes, unsure whether a scene would shift from psychological tension to supernatural horror. The lead actor later admitted that one particular forest sequence shook him more than any scripted moment ever had. The crew guided him to a clearing, told him to walk forward until he felt something wrong, and rolled the camera without warning him what would appear. His genuine hesitation, the tremor in his breathing, the way he kept glancing over his shoulder, none of that was acting. It was the honest response of someone navigating a narrative he could not predict. When the ending was finally shot, only 2 people on set knew what twist the film would deliver. The cast discovered the truth only during the final assembly, and several described feeling ambushed by the revelation. Their confusion, their unease, their inability to anchor themselves in the story, all of it lives inside the frames. Dark August is not just a horror film. It is a document of real disorientation, captured the moment it happened. Bonus pick, Don't Look Now, 1973. Before we wrap, here's one more horror film whose secrets were guarded so tightly that even its stars felt they were acting inside a waking dream. Don't Look Now is often remembered for its grief-stricken atmosphere and fragmented editing style. But far less discussed is how director Nicholas Roeg intentionally concealed the film's true ending from the cast. Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland were given scripts missing the climactic reveal, told only that the story would conclude with a confrontation in the dark. Roeg believed the emotional truth of their performances depended on their not knowing what form that confrontation would take. Throughout filming, Roeg played with chronology, shooting scenes out of order and inserting unsettling, unexplained imagery. Christie once admitted that she stopped trying to understand the narrative logically, instead relying on instinct and fear. That was exactly what Roeg intended the actors were meant to feel, as disoriented as the grieving parents they portrayed. The most shocking moment, the final red-hooded encounter, was executed with almost ritualistic secrecy. Sutherland expected a symbolic vision, something poetic and ambiguous. He did not expect a sudden violent figure that shattered his emotional preparation. When he rounded the corner and saw the red cloak illuminated in the dim light, his jolt of disbelief was real. The crew captured his shock in a single take, refusing to rehearse or explain what he was about to face. Roeg later said the ending worked precisely because Sutherland did not see it coming. That unfiltered reaction, a blend of horror, grief, and bewilderment, remains one of the most haunting final moments in cinema. Don't Look Now stands as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful terror comes not from what actors can imagine, but from what they are deliberately kept from knowing. When stories hide their endings, fear becomes something raw and personal, something no performance can fully mask. If exploring these sealed script horrors has pulled you deeper into the shadows, stay close. There are countless more secrets buried in the history of this genre, waiting for someone curious enough to uncover them. Which of these films unsettled you the most? Tell us what lingered after the screen went dark. If these stories born from secrecy have drawn you deeper into the genre's hidden corners, there's far more waiting in the shadows. Horror often reveals its sharpest edges, and the truth is withheld. And these films are proof of how powerful the unknown can be. Which of these concealed endings lingered with you the longest? Share your thoughts and step with us into the darkness again soon.